The landscape of abortion access is rapidly shifting across the United States. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June, ending a nearly 50-year-old constitutional right to abortion, Republican-led states have rushed to restrict the procedure or ban it altogether. California is moving even further in the opposite direction.
This November, we'll be advancing a constitutional amendment.
Democratic leaders want to make the state a sanctuary for abortion, welcoming patients from across the country who no longer can terminate their pregnancies at home. And now, California voters have a chance to enshrine reproductive rights in the state constitution. Hi, I'm Alexi Koseff, State Capitol reporter for Cal Matters, and this is Proposition 1 in a minute. Abortion access isn't going away in California anytime soon. The procedure has been legal here since 1967. Currently, you can get an abortion for any reason before a fetus is viable at about 24 weeks of pregnancy. California's constitution even includes a right to privacy that state courts have interpreted as protecting abortion. But with the end of Roe, Democratic leaders want greater assurances that abortion access won't be threatened by shifting political tides. They placed a state constitutional amendment before voters declaring that people have a right to choose to have an abortion and a right to choose or refuse contraceptives. Critics say the amendment would not offer any new protections and that it's merely a ploy to turn out liberal voters. But supporters argue an explicit guarantee of reproductive freedom is important in case legal interpretations of California's constitutional right to privacy change. Anti-abortion advocates also say the language is so broad that it would legalize late-term abortions beyond the 24-week point of viability. Proponents deny that. So vote yes if you want California to add a fundamental right to choose an abortion in the state constitution. Vote no if you don't. For more information on this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org. To learn more about California policy and politics, subscribe to our newsletter in the link below.
Would you put money on Steph Curry or LeBron James? Want to bet on the Rams winning the Super Bowl again? In 2018, the Supreme Court allowed states to legalize commercial sports betting. Since then, more than half of U.S. states have made the move. Then came a flurry of initiatives to legalize sports betting in California. 2 will appear on your ballot. Prop 27, funded by FanDuel, DraftKings, and other large gaming companies, would legalize online sports betting. We have a separate video for that. But there's another, Prop 26. I'll explain.
Hi, I'm Grace Getty, economy reporter at Cal Matters, and I'm going to explain Prop 26 in a minute.
Prop 26 would legalize sports betting at tribal casinos and at California's 4 horse race tracks. This prop, funded by several Native American tribes, would also allow tribal casinos to start offering roulette and dice games. If it passes, Prop 26 will allow anyone to sue for certain gaming law violations. Analysts estimate Prop 26 could generate tens of millions of dollars for the state annually, which would first fund schools and gambling regulation. Any money left over would go to the state's main fund and also fund things like mental health programs. Opponents are led by card rooms, which offer games like poker and pai gow. They say this idea would trigger more lawsuits against them, leading to lost jobs and tax revenue. Supporters say it will increase tribal self-sufficiency and draw more business to tribal casinos. Vote yes if you want to allow sports betting at racetracks and tribal casinos. And you want tribal casinos to add roulette and dice games. Vote no if you do not. One not-so-small disclaimer. If both sports betting initiatives pass, it's possible both could go into effect. But in all likelihood, a court would have to decide.
To learn more about this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org. To stay up to date on California policy and politics, subscribe to our newsletter in the link below. For Cal Matters, I'm Grace Getty.
In a lot of the country, if you watch the Super Bowl, odds are you saw ads for sports betting. A lot of them. Live in-game betting? Lady Luck?
Yes, ma'am.
Life's a gamble? But if you're in California, betting on sports, besides horse racing, is illegal, at least for now. In November, Californians will vote on 2 different initiatives to legalize sports betting. Prop 26, funded by Native American tribes, would legalize sports betting only at tribal casinos and horse race tracks. We have a separate video for that one. But then there's another, Prop 27.
Hi, I'm Grace Getty, economy reporter with Cal Matters, and I'm going to explain Prop 27 in a minute.
Prop 27 would allow online sports betting outside of Native American tribal lands. It's backed by some of the biggest names in online sports betting. If the measure passes, tribes could offer online sports betting.
Gaming companies could as well if they make a deal with a tribe. Operators would pay fees and taxes to the state. State analysts estimate Prop 27 could generate hundreds of millions of dollars annually for California. Most of that would be dedicated to homelessness and housing. 15% would go to Native American tribes that are not involved in sports betting. The measure also creates a new arm of the state Justice Department to regulate online sports wagering. Opponents say online sports betting could increase the risk of gambling addiction. They also argue the bulk of the profits would go to gaming companies in other states. Supporters say it would create a permanent funding stream to remedy homelessness and would boost funds for non-gaming tribes. Vote yes if you want to legalize online sports betting. Vote no if you don't. And one not-so-small disclaimer. If both sports betting initiatives pass, it's possible both could go into effect. But in all likelihood, a court would have to decide. To learn more about this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org. To stay up to date on California policy and politics, subscribe to our newsletter in the link below. For Cal Matters, I'm Grace Getty.
When school budgets are cut, art and music classes are often the first to go. But a coalition of educators, labor groups, musicians, and Hollywood actors say arts and music are just as important as science, math, and reading. In November, California voters will decide if the state's yearly budget should mandate about $1 billion more for arts and music education.
Hi, I'm Joe Hong. I'm the K-12 education reporter for Cal Matters, and this is Proposition 28 in a minute.
Today, the state requires all of California's public school students to get some form of art instruction. But the quality of education can vary based on where you live. So Prop 28 was designed to give more money to districts that serve more students living in poverty. This measure won't raise taxes, but it will affect the budget. By law, California guarantees that about 40% of the state's general fund goes to education. Prop 28 would add 1% to that and dedicate it to arts instruction. For next year, that comes out to about an additional $1 billion. Districts would need to use most of that money to hire teachers for art, music, or drama. Supporters of the measure say students need the space to express themselves now more than ever to overcome the mental health challenges brought on by the pandemic. The money would come out of the state's general fund, which currently has a surplus of nearly $100 billion. So for now, supporters say they don't anticipate any cuts from elsewhere in the state budget. Heading into the fall campaign, no individual or organization was spending money to oppose the measure. So vote yes if you want California to give more money to schools for art and music, and vote no if you don't.
To learn more about this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org. To stay up to date on California policy and politics, sign up for our newsletter in the link below. For Cal Matters, I'm Joe Hong.
It was on the ballot in 2018, 2020, and it's here again. Yep, Californians will once again weigh in on a kidney dialysis measure. I'll explain.
Hi, I'm Ana Ibarra, health reporter for Cal Matters, and this is Prop 29 in a minute.
Similar to its predecessors, Prop 29 would add rules for dialysis clinics. Most notably, this measure would require clinics to have at least one physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site, or in some cases remotely available. The initiative would also require clinics to report dialysis-related infections to the state and list physicians who have financial interest in clinics. The measure's proponent, the Health Workers Union SEIU-UHW, argues that Prop 29 would improve patient care and increase transparency. Despite its two previous losses, the union says it remains committed to reforming an industry dominated by large for-profit companies. The opposition campaign, supported by California's doctor lobby, among other medical groups, and financed largely by dialysis giants DaVita and Fresenius, says this is part of the labor group's ongoing fight to organize dialysis workers. They say having another medical professional on site is an unnecessary expense that could lead some clinics to cut their hours or shut down, potentially hurting patient access. So vote yes if you want more rules for dialysis clinics. Vote no if you don't.
To learn more about this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org. And to learn more about California policy and politics, subscribe to our newsletter in the link below. For Cal Matters, this is Ana Ibarra.
California. It's known for its stunning beaches, redwood forests, sunny weather, and dirty air. It has some of the worst air quality in the country. State data shows that more than 90% of Californians breathe unhealthy levels of air pollutants. To reduce air pollution and greenhouse emissions, Governor Gavin Newsom has asked the Air Resources Board to ban the sale of all new gas-powered cars by 2035. So, how will the state meet its goal, and who's going to pay for it? Voters will help decide this in November. Hi, I'm Nadia Lopez. I cover the environment for Cal Matters, and this is Prop 30 explained in 1 minute. Prop 30 would impose a 1.75% income tax increase on Californians making more than $2 million per year. The tax would generate up to $4.5 billion annually. Most of the money would go toward rebates for people buying zero-emission cars and to build more charging stations. Half of that funding will go to low and middle-income residents. A quarter of the money would provide funding to hire and train firefighters. The measure is backed by environmentalists and public health groups and is funded largely by the rideshare company Lyft. State regulations require Lyft and Uber drivers by 2030 to log 90% of their miles in electric vehicles. Supporters say the tax would generate much-needed funding to support wildfire prevention and help accelerate the transition to electric cars. They say the state's top earners should foot the bill since they're the ones most able to afford it. But opponents, including the state Republican Party and Governor Newsom, say Californians don't need more tax hikes because everyone is already feeling the effects of high inflation and surging gas prices. They argue that the tax would drive many residents out of the state to benefit a special interest, rideshare companies. Vote yes if you think millionaires should be taxed to help fund electric car rebates and more firefighters. Vote no if you don't. To learn about this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org. To stay up to date on California politics and policy, subscribe to our newsletter below. For Cal Matters, I'm Nadia Lopez.
In 2020, California lawmakers voted to prohibit the sale of flavored vape, chewing tobacco, and menthol cigarettes. No more tobacco in flavors like cotton candy, mango, and honey. But it hasn't taken effect yet because the tobacco industry collected enough signatures to put a referendum on California's November ballot.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Aguilera, reporter for Cal Matters, and this is Proposition 31 in under a minute.
Prop 31 asks voters whether they want California's flavored tobacco ban to go into effect. The federal government already banned flavored cigarettes except for menthol and has proposed banning those too. It's also banned pre-filled flavored vape pods, but not other flavored vape cartridges. All of those would be outlawed in California if voters back Prop 31. Advocates of the wider flavor ban argue that flavored products are marketed to and attract children and teens who go on to develop nicotine addiction. Opponents of the ban say the state already makes it illegal to sell tobacco products to minors, and that this law infringes on the freedoms of adults. At least 60 California cities and counties already ban selling some flavored tobacco products and menthol cigarettes. Those regulations won't change if the law is voted down. Vote yes if you want the law banning flavored tobacco in California to go into effect. Vote no if you want to strike down the state ban and allow the sale of flavored tobacco products.
To learn more about this proposition and others, visit calmatters.org. To stay up to date on California policy and politics, subscribe to our newsletter in the link below. For Cal Matters, I'm Elizabeth Aguilera.